Welcome to the ADHD Brains in Business show. I'm your host, Raine, an ADHD author, educator, coach, and the proud owner of a late ADHD diagnosis. In these lively, perfectly imperfect episodes packed with hacks, tips, and tricks, my guest experts and I are going to bring you motivation, education, and strategies on how to balance life, business, and ADHD so you can do things your brain's way and thrive with the confidence and the success that you deserve. So fasten your seatbelts, hold on to your hats and scream if you want to go faster, because here we go. Hi guys, welcome back. I am your host, Raine, and thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about something that I think every ADHD entrepreneur, every entrepreneur really, dreads, but only the most successful entrepreneurs and business owners actually understand how vital this part of business is, and that is failure, or rather what we think failure is. Because if you feel like nothing's working, you feel like you're behind, you feel like it's all messed up, or you've messed it all up again somehow, then this episode is for you. We're going to reframe what failure really means, why it's not a red flag, why it's more of a roadmap, and it's a sign for us ADHD brains who often interpret things like failure as ways that just aren't unhelpful and are often really untrue, that all or nothing thinking that can be like, right, nothing's working, I'm out of here, I'm a failure. We're going to talk about rejection sensitivity, of course we are, and the pressure to keep up with the neurotypical business rules. And why quite often, like, the flops are often the things that actually get us to the next level if we let them, if we keep pushing forward. So whether you're pivoting, panicking, or just procrastinating, then get comfy, because this might be the one pep talk that you didn't know that you needed. And the reason for this today is, like so much of what I do, I was prompted by two coaching calls I had last week. One was a one-to-one with a very successful business owner, multi-seven figures business that she runs, or multiple seven-figure businesses that she runs. And another was on our ADHD Brains in Business group coaching hot seat. But they were both coming down to the same thing, and there were the tears. And I know those tears. God knows I've cried those tears. Oh my God, have I cried those tears? And I'm going to guess that I think that you have too, because I think most business owners do cry those tears where they just feel like a big flop, like a big failure, like they've raised their head above the parapet, they've gone for it, and they've cocked it up again. And, you know, failing is a lesson, it's data, it's learning, it's giving us, okay, that didn't work, what is going to work? But so often with ADHD, we beat ourselves up, and this all or nothing thinking means like, no, it's never going to work for me. And I've seen it so many times, and I have been there so many times. So, you know, failure we often think is, you know, this, it's all over, I've failed, end of. But actually, really, we just need to relabel failure as feedback. So often people think, you know, failure is the end game. That's it. It's over for me. I can't stand it. But actually what we need to do is we need to relabel failure. We need to think of it as feedback, or a redirection, or a chance to pause, or, like I say, just data. You know, that all or nothing thinking that tends to think that we're either smashing it out of the park or we're falling apart, and there's no middle in between. But actually, you know, those messy launches, or the quiet months, or the flopped offers, they're all part of the process. They're all part of our ways of learning. And, you know, last week, one of the ladies was, you know, and like phenomenal business, and she'd changed her messaging. She changed what she was saying, and, you know, had big plans, and it didn't work. And, you know, we actually realized that what she was doing before is what was working, just she was not comfortable with it, and she wanted to try something new. And so actually what we were talking about is needing to take that step back. It was a hard watch, you know. And I said to her, why the tears? You know, we had the session and we talked about it, and I said, like, why the tears? And she said, because I feel like I'm failing. I feel like I failed in my business again. And I can tell you, I have been there, but actually the biggest failures have led to the biggest pivots in my business, or the biggest things. Like, it's always toughest just before you break through, nearly all the time. If you are struggling right now, if you're in the trenches, you're not failing if you keep going. I remember my worst, or one of my biggest sort of pivot moments, the moment that kind of got me to here really, was around, I was in LA, and I'd had an okay business. I'd had a fairly successful business, but I had wanted to level up. So I joined a mastermind. I joined the amazing Lisa Johnson's mastermind, and I've been in it for a year, and I've been doing okay, but I hadn't done what I really wanted to achieve. And it was towards the end, and I'd invested a lot of money in this mastermind, and it was money that, I'd done a launch. It had gone really well. I took that one launch and I invested all that money into the mastermind. And so consequently, I spent the rest of the year kind of catching up a little bit, feeling a bit bad, like this mastermind was like the equivalent of a mortgage for the year. So my family, every time, like, I'd be like, I can't afford this, or I can't do that. I felt like I'd taken away from my family. But I knew I was okay with it, because I knew it's towards this bigger purpose, and I was striving and moving forward. So I was doing stuff, but towards the end, I just had this feeling that I wasn't quite where I should be. And I knew I wasn't quite where I should be. The figures weren't stacking up. My energy wasn't stacking up. Launches were failing. I just hadn't got my messaging right. I was still like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And many of you may have even heard me tell this story, but I'm going to tell you the backstory to the story and what came after the story, I guess. And we were on a hot seat and we were on the beach, and I said, and it was sort of towards the end of the mastermind, and I said, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And everyone kind of said, well, Kim, you need to really embrace the ADHD stuff. I was already, I was working with menopause, my health and wellbeing background. I was coaching business owners. I was coaching women who were predominantly women, not just women, but mostly women who were high achievers, who were burnt out, who were struggling with overwhelm. I was becoming very aware. ADHD had been on my radar. I'd helped many of my clients get ADHD diagnosis. I realised I had my own ADHD, and it was all I spoke about really, like ADHD hyperfocus. I was so passionate about it, and I could see so much of it in the space that I was in. And, I said, oh, what am I doing? And someone said, Kim, you have got to do the ADHD. And my thoughts were, the first thing I said was, well, I don't want everyone to know I've got ADHD, at which 30 people on the beach laughed at me and went, Kim, everyone knows you've got ADHD. But my thought was, but everybody knows me for what I've done. Everyone's seen me. I've done all the shouting out. I've done the masterclass. I've done this. I've done all the, everybody knows what I'm doing. To turn again, to pivot again, to start again, there was the shame of it. There was the exhaustion of it. They're like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this again. And there was the fact that I had invested this money and promised my family that it was going to be this amazing success, and this was the answer. And actually what I had to do, I came off of that beach and I bawled my eyes out, and I phoned my husband from LA and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm going to do this, but I'm actually going to do something different. I'm actually going to change. Now, at that point, I thought that, pivoting to the ADHD world, becoming, an ADHD coach meant that I was kind of burning down everything. That all the hormone knowledge, all the health and wellbeing knowledge, all the neuroscience, all the mindset, all of the business knowledge would all be for nothing. Many, many years later, I know, no, that was just all part of it. ADHD was just kind of the layer, right? It was just like it absolutely was the missing piece. But to me at that point, I felt like the biggest failure. I felt like I'd let everybody down, and it was really hard for me. And I remember my husband picking me up from the airport and me telling him and saying, I just keep saying, I'm so sorry. And he, he was like, yeah, I'm used to it. I know you. But if I hadn't have been in that place, and it was difficult and it was embarrassing, and it was coming out and it was changing my messaging and changing all my, handles on social media and new websites, and people that would ask me, friends and family about my business, like, oh, well, actually, I'm doing ADHD. So it was almost like, oh, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? Because nothing was really sticking. But now I realise actually the reason none of that was sticking was that because this is absolutely what I needed to do. I just hadn't wanted to admit it to myself. And people have been telling me that whole time in that mastermind, you know, pushing me that way, but I just hadn't wanted to let go because I didn't want to feel like a failure. I didn't want to have to start again. I didn't want the shame of telling people that I was starting again. But that was not a failure. That was my crowning moment. It was a huge moment for me. And actually, everything that I had done up till that point, everything that I'd learned in that mastermind, everything I'd learned before that mastermind, every business piece of information that I had, everything I'd done allowed me to now build a business that worked with my brain, that worked with my energy, with what I wanted out of life, and everything changed from that moment for me. But I can tell you right now, it was hard and it was uncomfortable and there was some pretty ugly crying going on. So if you're in that space right now, giving up, and at that point, what I really wanted to do was go, do you know what? I'm just going to go and get a job. Bearing in mind, I'm pretty unemployable. And I imagine some of you, if you've been in business a long time, are probably quite unemployable too. I wouldn't be very good at turning up at 9 o'clock and only be able to go on breaks at certain times, etc. But you know, that the thing is, I think, very often the real fear that we have, it's not actually about failing, it's actually about the rejection. It's about the judgment. It's our old friend RSD again. It's that feeling of exposure. It's the feeling of putting yourself out there and kind of people going, oh God, here she goes again. Or you know, like, okay, I launched this product and no one bought it. Feels like it's proof that we're not actually good enough. But actually, very often, it's the timing or the messaging or the audience. I can think of many times when I've put stuff out there and it hasn't worked, only to go back and put it back out again 3 weeks later and it's absolutely flown. I mean, my first ADHD product was exactly that. I put it out, I got 2 sales. And, you know, you look around at, if you're in the online space, you look around at some of the great big launches and the big numbers that people do. And you think, and you're comparing yourself, which is just the worst thing to do. And you're thinking, well, if I haven't got that, then it's not working. And luckily at the time I was working with a coach that was like, you've got 2 sales. That tells you that you've got something. But to me, I was like, oh my gosh, it's failed. I knew it would fail. Sometimes it's just about getting over that part. We are not our business. In some ways, we are our business. When you have this in this online space, you know, it all sort of blurs into one. Work-life balance, is there really such a thing when you run your own business and you work from home and it's an online thing? So it's very, you know, you're not selling products, you're selling kind of your knowledge and your time. But actually, we kind of some ways need to separate ourselves from our business. You know, it's 2 separate entities. And very much what we can do is we can internalize what we feel to be failure, in air commas. But it's actually really important that we actually separate that outcome from our identity, because business is about failure, because failure is lessons, failure is learning, failure is data. We have to do it to get to the next place. But so often, ADHD, we feel that we are the failure. Now, if something's failing, I'm like, okay, it's not working, pull it. But it has no consequence to me as a human being, to me as a person. It's not about me, it's about me trying to do something in my business, right? It's just an opportunity for data. It doesn't need to be a drama. We need to get comfortable with collecting data, if you like, collecting the failures, looking at the analytics, at the numbers, and okay, well, I invested this money here, but I didn't get it back here, or I put out this product and nobody's bought, or I'm using this message and nobody's interested. We just can't keep attaching the meaning to it that we are somehow less than because something that we have done in our business doesn't work. Every flop teaches us about your audience, it teaches you about your energy, it teaches you about your offer. And if you are resilient and brave enough to take those lessons and to still stay in the game and to still keep moving forward, then that is really valuable gold, because you can use it and you can turn it around. And I would definitely say, you know, the stuff that I learned before from the failures, from all the time, I use that now. That is, you know, I make money from that stuff now. It's my fuel. Successful entrepreneurs fail the most. You know, any successful business is the business that has failed the most, or not failed the most, but got up from the most. So, you know, the story is, isn't it, about Mickey Mouse being constantly turned away. Not Mickey Mouse. Walt Disney being constantly turned away with Mickey Mouse. Colonel Saunders and his Kentucky Fried Chicken going to however many people before somebody took him up on his thing. It's the tenacity. We've got to be relentless, and we've got to learn to be resilient, because it's much better to look at it again and go, right, how can I tweak that? How can I try again? Sometimes you might feel like you're failing, but sometimes it might just be that you're actually in the messy middle of it. And don't forget, with ADHD, the messy middle is often the part where the hard work is, where the less interesting stuff is, where the important stuff is, where the work has to be done. And so there's part of you that will kind of be like, oh, right, great, that's failed, I'm out of here. Because your brain is like, well, let's go and do something more exciting. So we have to be strategic. And we also have to understand when we are failing or something isn't working and we need to change what we're doing, or we need to pivot, versus when we're having some kind of impulsive moment or shutting down because our brain's like, oh, I'm a bit bored of this. We've got to learn to do the boring stuff and seeing projects through to the end so that we can make money. My saying, like I say, is you only get paid for done. So when we think we failed every minute and throw everything to the wall, we're never going to get anywhere. You know, if we are taking our time, if things are going slow, that doesn't mean that we're stuck. Pausing doesn't mean that we're quitting. If you need to take a step back and you need to take a breath and you need to take a beat, that's okay. You can do that strategically without needing to burn the whole thing down. We have to also remember that neurotypical business blueprints are often what lead ADHD business owners to burn out or give us imposter syndrome. And then we can't keep up and we think that we're failing. Build your business in a neurodivergent friendly way. Make it rest-led. Look at your energy. See where your intuition is guiding you. Make sure it's flexible, because that is how it's going to be successful. We are not failing when we are needing to work it out. And I also think that when you get your ADHD diagnosis and you start to see things differently, I think there is this time where the ground is a bit shaky beneath you. But if this can be a turning point for you, this can be the point where you take everything you've known, every bit of data, every failure, and you turn it around. And I say, like, you cry, you reset, and you rise. And, you know, ultimately, you can throw yourself on the floor and have the tantrum and have the tears, because, like I say, I've done it. And I actually think it can be quite cathartic. So you can do that. And you can, you know, I've had people, I've felt a failure on so many occasions, so many times where, you know, people have I know people have laughed at me with what I'm doing. I know people that I've seen people roll their eyes when I talk about my business. I even had someone say to me once, how's your little business going? So how's your little business going? And it was a lady who was dripping in diamonds from her husband's business that was very successful, who spent most of her life on juicing retreats and playing tennis and whatnot. And when she said that to me, I didn't rise up and come back to her. I felt like a little person, because my little business it was doing okay. I would love to see that lady now and tell her that my little multi-six-figure business is doing not too bad, thank you very much. And I did it myself, and it was hard, and there were tears, and there were a few tantrums, and there were lots and lots and lots of failures. But there was also lots of data, and there were lots of lessons, and I used every little one of them to build the business that I've got now. So if you are there and you are feeling like you're failing, if you are feeling like it's not working, if you feel like people are laughing at you and they ignore them, because they're probably not, and you've got the knowledge, you can do this. So I just want to leave you with that at the moment. You know, like, you can do this, you can do it your way. Failure it's a detour. Success is built on things that don't work first time, and you're allowed to fail without it meaning anything about you personally. Your business doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be aligned with you. Your business doesn't even need to be a huge, huge business. It just needs to be enough for you. And maybe knowing what's right for you what the right levels are for you, what you're ready to invest for you, what time and energy and money you want to invest for you, how you want to run the business for you, can really help you not fail and not feel like a failure. But very often what I see people doing is looking around at how everybody else should do it, how people think they should be running their business. But you are enough. You've got enough information. We're going to help you. We're going to be on this journey together. So think about it now. How do you need to run your business that suits you? And I hope that today you're walking away feeling maybe a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit braver, because here's the truth: you're not failing. You're learning, you're adjusting, you're growing into a business that fits your brain. So let's get up, let's brush ourselves off, and let's go again. And if you need to, you get up, you brush yourself off, and you go again, and you go again, because I promise you, I'm living proof that failure is just data. And now when I fail, I don't even use that word anymore, because now I'm like, okay, lesson. What's going right here? Let me know what you're going to do. And guys, if you love this conversation, please don't forget to subscribe or leave a review or share it with your fellow ADHD business buddies who need to hear it. And if you're ready to build a business that works with your brain rather than against it, why don't you come and hang out with us in my ADHD Business Collective? Or if you're looking for a coach, you can head over to our Neurodiversity Training Academy, where you can find our directory full of our NTA ADHD advanced coaches. Peace out, brothers and sisters. I'll see you on the other side.